The day the woman who'd always been Ethan Hayes' one that got away hemorrhaged during labor. She sent him a text. "We weren't meant to be in this life. Next lifetime. Promise you'll come marry me sooner." Ethan set down his phone without a flicker of emotion and turned his attention back to Maya's pregnant wife tending to me with gentle care. I'd thought he'd long since gotten over her. I was wrong. The moment he learned she'd actually died in childbirth. He never smiled at me again, day after day. He slipped poison into my food. He piled my meals with extra supplements, forcing the baby inside me to grow larger and larger. By the time I went into labor, the baby was too big to pass. That was when he dropped the mask and screamed at me. Raw with rage. Luna was in this much pain, wasn't she? If you hadn't forced me to marry you, she never would have died so horribly. You owe her for this. I'm gonna make you feel every second of what she went through. In the end, I suffered through hell and died bleeding out on that delivery table. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the exact day Luna Moore had sent that text. This time, I'd step aside. I wouldn't be the thing standing between them anymore. 1. Babe, after your prenatal checkup, I'll take you out for your favorite barbecue. That familiar voice pulled me jolting awake from the darkness. I blinked hard, and my eyes locked with Ethan's, those soft, tender eyes that looked like they could melt right into you. Either this was a final flicker of consciousness before I died, or I'd been reborn. Ethan was driving, one hand pressed to the pressure point on my hand. I got carsick. He knew that, if I hadn't actually died once already, I'd still be drowning in his gentle affection. Right then, his phone buzzed. He pulled his hand away without a single change in expression, but I caught a glimpse of the screen. Just like in my last life, the text was from Luna. Last time around, I never asked about it. Never gave it a second thought. Even when I knew who was texting him, I never felt threatened. I trusted Ethan completely. I buried the hatred burning in my chest, forced a thin smile, and spoke. "If it's something urgent, you can go ahead." I didn't call him out on it outright. 5 years of shared history was more than enough for us to read each other's minds. Ethan's face stayed perfectly neutral as he replied flatly, "It's nothing important. What matters is you." But the second he finished speaking, his grip on the steering wheel tightened, his knuckles going white. I'd never noticed that last time. He was just pretending not to care. If he didn't actually care, why had he tormented me day after day when he found out Luna had died in childbirth? I could never forget the way he'd looked at me as I hemorrhaged during labor, his eyes bloodshot, his hands clamped tight around my throat, a ferocity in his gaze I'd never seen before. He'd said, "Elena Bennett, I've waited so long for this. I'm gonna make you suffer every single thing Luna went through. You wanna know something? I never loved you. You forced me into this marriage. If it weren't for you, Luna never would have married that deadbeat loser. Without you, she never would have died so horribly. I didn't even get to say goodbye." Go to hell, Elena. I didn't have time to process the shock. The pain was unbearable, and I sobbed, begging him to save me. Ethan's gaze had been ice cold. He didn't say another word. He just stood there and watched as I bled out, writhing in agony until I drew my last breath. He'd ordered the doctors not to help me after I died. He didn't even bother arranging my funeral. Instead, he knelt in front of Luna's grave and sobbed his heart out. He ran a gentle hand over her headstone and whispered, "Luna, I avenged you. Next lifetime, I swear I'll marry you." I'd been stunned all those years. He'd just been waiting for that moment, and yet he'd once sworn I was the only woman he'd ever love. Not this time. I wasn't gonna insert myself into their tragic little love story ever again. 2. Babe, you in there? You're not mad that Luna reached out, are you? Ethan suddenly pulled the car over, his voice yanking me out of my thoughts. His eyes looked full of concern, but the memory of my brutal death had cold sweat soaking through the back of my dress. I forced another weak smile. "Ethan, you should go see her. This is a matter of life and death." I caught the flash of surprise on his face. I had no idea what was going through his head. Was he confused that Iance, so possessive of him, was suddenly being so generous? Or had he been dying to run to Luna this whole time, just waiting for me to give him permission? In the end, Ethan still insisted on staying. I couldn't stand watching his fake sincerity another second. It made my stomach turn. I offered to go to the hospital with him to see Luna. That's when he finally agreed. I could see the quiet sigh of relief he let out. the tension melting from his brow. He was right. In a way, I'd loved him so much back then, but he'd never turned me down. Either. Ethan had started out as a low-level clerk at my dad's company. If he hadn't dated and married me, he never would have worked his way up to where he was. My mom had died young, leaving my dad to raise me alone, but right before I got married. He'd been diagnosed with terminal cancer. My dad never liked Ethan, but because I cared about him, he'd lain there in his hospital bed and refused to close his eyes for good until Ethan promised to love and protect me for the rest of my life. Back then, I'd thought Ethan meant at least some of it. I didn't find out the truth until after I died. He'd only been scheming to seize the entire Bennett family fortune, and the reason he'd never gotten over Luna was because back when he loved her most, he'd had nothing to give her. After I died, he had everything except Luna. I'd been nothing but a punchline this whole time. I was still replaying every moment of my last life when the car stopped. Ethan looked at me with a flicker of guilt, but still reached out to help me out gently. I suddenly pulled away from his touch and smiled like it was nothing. It's only 2 months along. I'm not that fragile. For Ethan, this was the first time I'd ever shied away from him. I used to cling to him constantly. Even the smallest brush of his hand would make me giddy for hours. Ethan froze for a split second, then turned and headed for the hospital. His steps were hurried, like he'd forgotten I was even right behind him. That eagerness said it all. It laid bare just how much he cared about Luna. I'd already made my peace with it, but seeing him like this still sent a sharp ache through my chest. 3. By the time I walked in slowly, Luna was crying in Ethan's arms. I thought I'd never see you again. Why did you marry someone else? Pale and fragile. She looked so heartbreakingly pitiful that even an outsider felt a twinge of sympathy. She acted like she hadn't gone and married someone else herself. Ethan pressed his lips tight and didn't answer, but his hand moved on its own, rubbing soothing circles on her back. When Luna found out Ethan was with me, she'd married the first guy who came along. 6 months ago, that man had gotten locked up for a crime and she'd gotten pregnant. Since then, she'd texted Ethan nonstop, complaining about how hard her life was. Ethan acted like he didn't care, but behind my back, he'd been sending her money. I'd never paid much attention to money, and I'd never cared what Ethan spent. If he hadn't let it slip right before I died, I probably would have kept being his personal ATM forever. A nurse came rushing in and knocked right into me. I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. You must be the husband. Sign the consent form right now, we can't waste any time. Ethan didn't correct her. He just grabbed the pen and signed the form in a panic. I stood in the doorway, feeling like a total stranger. Last time around, he'd refused to sign for me no matter what, so that was it. Luna really did mean that much more to him. When they wheeled Luna past Ethan, she clung to his hand like she never wanted to let go, her eyes glistening with tears. Ethan, I'm scared. Stay with me, please. Ethan was about to say yes when he glanced over and saw me. The words died in his throat. I just lifted one corner of my mouth in a smirk. Go on, it's a life on the line. With my permission. He didn't hesitate for a second. He held Luna's hand and walked right into the OR with her. The room went quiet all at once, and my thoughts slowly cleared. If Luna's condition had actually been that serious, they wouldn't have waited for Ethan to show up. I didn't even bother calling out her little act. A long while later, they wheeled Luna back out. She was still clutching Ethan's hand like a lifeline. The nurse sounded envious. Your husband is so good to you. Most men would have run the second they saw all that blood. But yours didn't even blink. He stayed with you the whole time. She wasn't speaking loud, but I heard every word. Luna smiled shyly. I lost the baby, but having a man like this by my side, that's more than enough. Then she looked right at me, her eyes sharp with triumph and defiance. She had every right to be smug. Ethan might have married me, but his heart had always belonged to her. I didn't stay a second longer. I turned and walked away. Let them have their sweet little moment. It was all theirs. Through the glass, I saw Ethan glance at my back. He lifted his foot like he might follow, but when Luna called his name softly, his gaze snapped right back to her. They went back into the room together. I stood outside the building, shivering. I'd forgotten my jacket when I got out of the car, and Ethan had always been so attentive to every little thing about me hadn't noticed at all. 4. I took a cab home alone. Looking at the house we'd lived in for years, every corner still marked with traces of Ethan, I felt a sudden, restless irritation. All those sweet memories came flooding back. He'd cooked for me, done my laundry, driven all over the city in the middle of the night just because I'd mentioned craving something offhand, and none of it had been real. I guess the things he said right before I died had been the truth. I called my lawyer and had him draw up divorce papers, then booked an appointment for a termination. Once it was all arranged, the weight lifted off my chest. I sat on the couch all night, staring at nothing. Ethan never came home that night. It was what I'd expected, and somehow still a surprise. I'd thought he'd at least keep up the act a little longer. At least this time, Luna didn't die. At 5 a.m., the front door creaked open. I turned my head slowly. When our eyes met, Ethan looked startled for a split second. "Why aren't you in bed?" It sounded like the same casual concern he always showed, but I couldn't hear a shred of real feeling in it anymore. Made sense, I guess. You only have one heart. When it's set on someone, there's no room left for anyone else. Before I could answer, Luna stepped out from behind him, a smirk playing on her lips. "Hi, Elena." Ethan insisted I stay here for a while. He says I've got no one to take care of me right now. You don't mind, do you? My jaw tightened. I looked at Ethan, but he averted his eyes and said nothing. Even an idiot could hear what she was really saying. She was showing off, bragging that Ethan would risk making me angry just for her. If I said no, I'd be the unreasonable, heartless one. It made me sick to my stomach, not because they were being affectionate, but because this was my house, and Ethan had brought a stranger into it without even asking me first. I let out a cold laugh and turned to him. "Don't you think you should have asked me first?" Ethan snapped like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Elena, can you stop being so cold? Luna has nobody right now. She almost died in that hospital. As her friend, shouldn't I help her? You're my wife. You should be nicer to my friends." In a few short sentences, he'd planted himself firmly on the moral high ground. Once, I would have backed down. I loved him. After all, I'd have given him anything he asked for. But I'd already died once, killed by the man I'd loved most. This time, I wasn't gonna put myself through that misery again. I scoffed. "You seem to forget this is my house. Everything you have is mine. And I'm a neat freak. I don't let strangers stay in my house. And I won't be with someone who's in love with another woman." Ethan froze. He clearly hadn't expected me to refuse him so firmly. He just stared at me, stunned. Luna burst into tears instantly, clutching Ethan's arm. "I know I'm just a burden. My husband's in prison. My parents disowned me. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. I'll leave right now. Please don't fight over me." All the anger melted from Ethan's face. He looked at Luna with such tenderness, then pulled her into the guest room loud enough for me to hear. "You stay here as long as you want. Half this house is mine. I promise, even if the whole world turns its back on you, I never will." He held Luna's hand as they walked past me. She shot me a triumphant smirk, raised an eyebrow, and mouthed, "Idiot. The latecomer never beats the one that got away." I just smiled, unfazed. I didn't need her to tell me that. I'd learned it the hard way. 5. Once Ethan got Luna settled, he came back downstairs. He walked over to me, his voice softening. "Babe, you know she's got nobody but me right now. Don't be mad, okay? I'll do all the chores this month. Deal." He reached for my hand, but I turned away before he could touch me. His hand hung frozen in midair. I wanted to snap at him, to demand why he'd done this, why he'd married me if his heart belonged to someone else. Why had he killed me last time? But I already knew the answers to all those questions. I'd already decided to walk away. I might as well do it with some dignity. I pushed down the rising anger and spoke calmly. "Just keep your friend out of my way. That's all I ask." I put extra emphasis on the word friend. Ethan knew I'd figured out Luna was the one that got away for him. Or maybe he'd known all along, and just kept pretending I didn't. He tried to say something else, but I was already grabbing my coat and heading out. Today was the day I was terminating the pregnancy. It wouldn't be fair to bring a child into a house built on lies. The cold of the operating table seeped into my back, and I thought of how I'd died laying on a table just like this. The overhead lights burning my eyes. Ethan's poisonous gaze burned into my memory. The anesthesia pulled me under, and everything went black. "I'm sorry, baby." Last life I couldn't bring you into this world, and now I can't either. Forgive me for being selfish. I can't let you grow up without a father who loves you, and I can't fool myself into thinking a single-parent home would be enough. When the nurse woke me up, my head was still foggy. I could feel the empty space in my stomach. Like a piece of my heart had been carved out. I made it home, my lips pale and dry, the second I walked in the door. I smelled cooking. Ethan was in the kitchen, focused on cooking. Luna sat at the island, her chin resting on her hands. If this hadn't been my house, you'd think they were a loving married couple. The man who'd once sworn he'd only ever cook homemade meals just for me was now making dinner for someone else. Ethan must have heard the door. He turned and looked at me. I glanced coldly at the chicken feathers in the trash can, and my stomach lurched. I was terrified of birds with sharp beaks. Just seeing their feathers gave me hives. I never ate poultry, and Ethan knew that. It had never once been on our dinner table, but for Luna, he was willing to ignore every single thing about me. Ethan followed my gaze and saw the feathers he hadn't thrown out yet. He looked guilty. Luna's still weak. She needs to build her strength back up. I'll clean this up right now. I looked away and gave a quiet hum. I was heading to my room to rest when I passed Luna. She grabbed my hand, then threw herself backward onto the floor. The loud thud caught Ethan's attention. Luna burst into tears instantly, looking frail and wronged. She looked right at me. Elena, I know I'm a nuisance here. If you want me gone, just say the word and I'll leave. You don't have to push me to take out your anger. Ethan came running, not even bothering to wipe his hands. He shoved me hard, and I fell to the floor. I felt warm liquid seep between my legs. I looked down. My white pants were already stained bright red with blood. Elena, you know she just had surgery. She's so weak, and you still put your hands on her. What is wrong with you? I can't believe how cruel you are. I smiled bitterly. I'd always heard that real disappointment doesn't scream. Now I knew exactly what that felt like. Luna had just had surgery, so had I. If Ethan had bothered to look at me, he would have noticed something was wrong, but he hadn't. Whatever. Ethan lifted Luna gently in his arms, then glared at me with pure venom. You think about what you did. When you're ready, you'll go to the hospital and apologize to her. Have I spoiled you too much all these years? Is that why you think you can act like this? With zero empathy. 6. From the angle Ethan couldn't see, Luna raised an eyebrow at me. Smug. I called out to Ethan right before he ran out the door. He stopped, annoyed. What now? You gonna be happy until Luna's dead? I pulled the divorce papers my lawyer had just sent out of my bag and held them out to him. Ethan, let's get a divorce. Ethan froze. What are you throwing a fit about now? You're the one who messed up. How can you stand there and ask for a divorce like you're in the right? I laughed coldly and jerked my chin toward the security camera. If you've got eyes, go check the footage. I don't believe you're dumb enough to fall for this cheap act. Don't assume everyone else is as stupid as you are. Luna's face went white. She clearly hadn't expected the house to have security cameras. Ethan, don't be mad at her. I'm sure she didn't mean it. Put me down. I'm fine. 1 minute she'd been sobbing, begging Ethan to defend her. Now she was in a hurry to drop the whole thing. Ethan wasn't blind to what that meant. The anger in his eyes faded instantly when he looked at me. It was just a misunderstanding. No need for divorce, babe. You know she just lost her baby. She's not in a good place. Cut her some slack. I couldn't believe it. Even with the proof right in front of him, he was still making excuses for her. All that love I'd given him. What a joke. I spoke flatly. No heat in my voice. She lost her baby. I lost mine too. So if I'm not in a good place, are you gonna cut me some slack? Ethan lost it. He dropped Luna like she was nothing and ran over to me, gripping my arms so tight it hurt. What did you do with our baby? I glanced down at my pants, where the blood had already dried. Ethan followed my gaze, his expression dark and unreadable. I clarified. Calm, it's not your fault. I already had the termination. That push just reopened the wound. I wasn't the type to blame other people for my own choices. Ethan's brow furrowed. Why? I had no idea why he was upset. Last time around, he hadn't cared about our baby at all. She'd been full term, a little girl, and he hadn't even glanced at her body after I died. Now it was only 2 months along, and he was acting like he cared. What was there to be sad about? Maybe he'd been playing the loving husband for so long. He'd started to believe his own act. It was all so ironic. I held the divorce papers out to him again. Because I want a divorce. I won't let my child have a father whose heart's somewhere else. If you two love each other so much, I'm getting out of your way. Happy. 7. Ethan stood there frozen for a long time, saying nothing. Luna saw her chance and latched onto his arm immediately. Ethan, if Elena's gonna step aside and let us be together, just sign it. You've got everything now. You can keep that promise you made me. Her agenda was so obvious it was almost comical. Ethan hesitated. Luna just grabbed a pen, put it in his hand, and guided his signature right onto the page. It all happened so fast. Ethan didn't even have time to react. That was the second time I'd owed Luna a thank you. The first was her death, which had shown me Ethan's true colors. The second was her interference, which had made this divorce so easy. Luna handed me the papers, grinning like she'd won. Elena, want me to help you pack? Since you're divorced now, it's probably not right for you to keep living here. She already acted like she owned the place. I slipped the papers into my bag slowly, then smiled sweetly. I don't think you know, Ms. Moore. Everything the Bennett family owns is my separate premarital property, including this house. As for what belongs to Ethan, probably just that beat-up car in the garage. I watched as her face turned darker and darker with anger. I had my dad to thank for that. He'd told me never to let a stranger get their hands on the family fortune. So I'd had a prenuptial agreement drawn up before we married. With this divorce, Ethan wasn't getting a single cent. Even this house was in my name only. When she didn't say anything, I asked, "Want me to help you too pack?" Luna stamped her foot in frustration and shoved Ethan. Ethan, say something. You were with her for years. How can you walk away with nothing? That seemed to snap Ethan out of his trance. His eyes cleared, and he wrenched his arm away from her. Shut up. Luna flinched. Ethan's eyes were red-rimmed as he looked at me. Babe, why do we have to do this? Is it just because I pushed you, or because I brought her here? I'm sorry. I was just so worried about her. I wasn't thinking. If it bothers you that much, I'll kick her out. Just please don't leave me. His voice cracked. I couldn't tell if he was being genuine or not. Maybe he'd finally seen Luna for who she really was. Made sense. He'd worked under my dad for years. She was sharp. If Luna had really cared about him, she never would have married someone else and had a kid. And she never would have turned on him the second she found out he was broke. 8. So when the one that got away was still alive, Ethan was actually capable of caring about the woman in his bed. But was it me he'd miss? Our baby? Or the power and money I'd given him? I lifted my eyes lazily and gave a faint smile. You were the one who gave up on me and the baby first. I knew he had no idea what I was talking about. But saying it out loud let me let go of just a little of the pain from my last life. I was asleep by the time Ethan moved out. These past few days, these past 2 lives had worn me out. In my dream, a soft little child ran up to me. She took my hand. I knelt down, and she stood on her tiptoes to pat my head. Her voice was tiny and sweet. Thank you, Mommy. I didn't know what she was thanking me for. I'd taken away her chance to live. After all, when I woke up, my pillow was wet with tears. The big house felt empty without Ethan's presence. All his things were gone. He might not have wanted to leave, but I had ways of making him. Ethan was smart, and he knew me well enough to know that once I made a decision, I never went back. Leaving on his own was a lot more dignified than getting thrown out by security. Surprisingly, I didn't miss having him around at all. I guess when you know from the start it won't last, you should just let go. But last time, I'd been too stubborn. I'd clung to those tiny scraps of fake affection like they were honey. Once I recovered physically, I went to the company and started taking over the business. Before, Ethan had handled everything, and I'd been happy to take it easy. Running a company wasn't easy. I started from the very bottom, learning the basics, working late every single night, but I'd never felt more fulfilled. A month later, I walked downstairs exhausted after a long day. There, under the street lamp outside the building, stood Ethan. His shadow stretched long across the sidewalk. He'd tried to contact me over the past month, but I'd blocked him on everything. Our mutual friends told me he'd been in a car accident, just cuts and bruises, they said. But a mild concussion too. I didn't care much. I just asked a friend to drop off a fruit basket for him. Consider it a thank you for all those years he'd run the company for me. When I saw him up close, his hair looked longer. And there was deep exhaustion under his eyes. I planned to walk right past him, but he ran over and grabbed my wrist. There was something in his eyes I couldn't place. Guilt, regret, and love. I laughed at myself for even thinking it. Ethan didn't love me. How could he? Mr. Hayes, this is a public place. Have some decency. I yanked my hand away sharply, my voice cold and formal. 9. Ethan shifted awkwardly in front of me, his eyes never leaving my face. You came back too, didn't you? Those words hit me like a stone thrown into still water. My calm, steady heart skipped a beat. I'd never gone after Ethan for revenge. What he'd done had been in another life. I couldn't punish him for things he hadn't done yet, but hearing him say that, it reignited all the hatred I'd felt for him. I stared him down. I didn't need a mirror to know how cold and furious my gaze was. My face confirmed his suspicion. He gave a bitter smile. I'm so sorry. Just sorry. That was supposed to make up for all the pain I'd endured. He really did think I was easy to fool. I scoffed. The light went out of his eyes. I finally understand what you meant that day we got divorced. I failed you. I failed our baby. I'm so sorry. Fine, if he knew the whole truth. I didn't have to hold back anymore. Mr. Hayes. You got what you wanted. You're with the one that got away now. So leave me alone. If you know why I hate you so much, you'll do the smart thing and stay away. We're nothing to each other anymore. Nobody's standing between you and Luna. Let's just end this with some dignity. For both our sakes. Sometimes I hated myself for being too soft. I could have ruined him completely. But all I wanted was to get as far away from him as possible. He wasn't worth getting blood on my hands over. Ethan's lips parted. He took one slow step forward and reached for my hand. Hesitant, like he was afraid I'd flinch away. I stepped back. The whole thing was almost funny. What? You want Luna to get the wrong idea? His hand froze midair. His voice was rough. I'm not with Luna. Don't you get it? After you died, I never slept a single night through. I thought I hated you, but slowly, I realized you're the one I've always loved. Please, give me a chance to make it up to you. I didn't know much about what happened after I died last time, but watching him act like he cared so deeply, it made my stomach turn. My eyes were ice. The only reason you're still standing here in one piece isn't because I still have feelings for you. It's because I'm merciful. I'm not gonna become the kind of person you are, but if you keep bothering me, I won't hesitate to make you feel every bit of the pain I went through. He tried to say more, but one look from my eyes shut him up. I turned and walked away. Late affection is worth less than dirt. 10. I'd already heard from our mutual friends that Luna hadn't married that other guy because if it's not Ethan, anyone will do. She'd actually liked the guy, but she'd wanted a backup plan, so she'd told Ethan she was marrying out of heartbreak. To make him feel guilty. Let's be real, anyone with half a brain could see it. If she'd really cared that much, she could have waited for Ethan alone. Why marry someone you don't love and have their kid? After our divorce, Luna refused to believe Ethan had walked away with nothing. She stuck to him like glue. Even the car accident had happened because they'd been fighting in the car. Luna had demanded Ethan go beg me for his share of the money. When he refused, she'd screamed and yelled. Even grabbed the steering wheel right out of his hand. The car had spun out and crashed into a telephone pole. Ethan might have hit his head, but the knock had finally cleared his mind. Maybe that soft, shining the one that got away had finally shown her true, ugly face. Last time, Ethan had never gotten over Luna because she died in his mind at her very best. I got in my car. In the rearview mirror, I saw Luna storming toward Ethan, furious. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I read her lips well enough to catch bits and pieces. Something about once a cheater, always a cheater, and you want what you can't have. And I thought I was the love of your life. Why are you chasing Elena? Ethan looked exhausted and disgusted. Yeah, that was Ethan all over. When he had me, he wanted Luna. Now that I'd stepped aside and let them be together, he was crawling back to me. Ethan shook her off and said flatly, I never agreed to be with you. Stop following me, Luna snapped. Humiliated, like I even wanted to be with you. You were a nobody before, without the Bennett money. Who'd even look at you? She'd finally said the quiet part out loud. I thought Ethan would be hurt, but he just smiled, like a weight had lifted off his shoulders. Yeah, without Elena. I'm nothing, happy now, get lost. And with that, Luna stormed off in a rage. I'd seen enough of the show. I hit the gas and drove away. In the mirror, Ethan stood there staring after my car. Before, I hadn't been sure if he was actually sorry for coming after me, but now, I knew he meant it. He really did regret it. He'd thrown away a wealthy, beautiful, capable wife for a petty, greedy woman. Wasn't that exactly what he'd wanted? 11. I'd thought Ethan had enough pride to stay out of my life after that. I was wrong. During the company's hiring round, I sat on the interview panel waiting for the next candidate. When the door opened, there he was. He looked sharp, put together like he'd dressed up specifically for this interview. Everyone in the room knew who he was, the former general manager. Now applying for an intern position. They all exchanged glances, carefully watching to see how I'd react. I met Ethan's intense gaze heat-in, no hesitation. I asked him a few standard interview questions, then set down my pen and looked right at him. What makes you think you're a better candidate than all the young applicants we've seen? Ethan answered with complete confidence. I worked here for 5 years and served as general manager for 3. I know this company's direction better than anyone. I'm the only one who can actually help you. He was so sure of himself. The whole room went quiet. I just curled my lips slightly and spoke slowly, calmly. This company has moved on. I need fresh, energetic new talent. Your time here, it's over. And it wasn't just the company that had moved on. It was us, too. I wanted him to know I'd built a new life. I wasn't stuck in the pain of the past anymore. The look on his face told me he got the message. He didn't know what to say. I kept going. I'm sorry, Mr. Hayes. You don't meet our hiring criteria. Next candidate, please. Wait. Ethan cut me off, then turned to the other 2 interviewers beside me. Leave us. I need to speak with Ms. Bennett privately. The other interviewers hesitated, looking at me uncertainly. I didn't even bother looking up. I have nothing to say to Mr. Hayes. We're in the middle of work. If you don't have a legitimate interview to give, please don't waste our time. Ethan panicked. He stood up, slamming both hands on my desk. Elena, I know I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just let me stay near you any job. Anything. I can't live without you. The 2 other interviewers held their notebooks up in front of their faces, trying to disappear. They clearly didn't want to be there for this, but since I hadn't dismissed them, they had to stay. You could hear a pin drop in that interview room. I swear I could hear Ethan's heart hammering in his chest. Once, I'd given him chance after chance. I'd given him love, power, money, so much that I'd lost myself completely. And in my final moments last life, I'd only begged him to save me. But his coldness had shocked me. It had shown me just how much of a fool I'd been. Ethan's eyes were locked on mine. His trembling hands gave away how nervous he was. There was so much in his gaze, begging, hope, desperation. I smiled slowly and said the cruelest thing I could, in the calmest voice. Then die. The second the words left my mouth, all the strength went out of him. His whole posture crumpled. 12. I don't know what was going through Ethan's head when he walked out of that room. He only said one thing before he left. If dying is the only way to make up for what I did to you, then I'll do it. I didn't respond. I just I'll lead for the next candidate like nothing had happened. I was mid-interview with the next applicant. Hadn't even asked my second question when commotion erupted outside. Someone jumped. My stomach dropped. Everyone around me ran for the windows. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't go look. I didn't need to see the horror below to know how it ended. Out of nowhere, I thought of our wedding. Ethan had ignored the MC's schedule and kissed me, soft and secret, right there in front of everyone. Maybe he really had cared about me. Once. You really are just as arrogant as ever, aren't you? I sniffled, then stood up. I had a mess to clean up. After all, Ethan, we're even.